I don't like the word problematic all that much, but I'll probably be using it about a bazillion times in this video, so be ready for that. The general thesis of this video is the title: Everything is problematic. This is basically going to kind of be an analysis of both PC culture and SJWs and anti-feminists, and also kind of an explanation of what we're all talking about when we say things are problematic. As you can see, there's also a lot of air quotes in this video. So what do I mean when I say everything is problematic? Basically, I mean that any social or cultural norms, any social institutions, media, art, really anything that's shaped, created, or influenced by human hands and human thoughts is in some way going to be problematic or reflect some level of social harms. This is because all human beings are biased in one way or another, either consciously or unconsciously, and we all behave in a way that can harm other people, and we can all potentially benefit from the harm of other people, again, consciously or subconsciously. So the internet has given us access to conversations we really haven't had public access to before. In fact, many of these conversations would not have been appropriate to have in public before now. And I think that a lot of the ways that communication is happening over the internet is really detrimental to what is ultimately a very important conversation to have. Because what we need to really analyze and engage with is the fact that we take a lot of social norms and things that are produced by humans completely for granted as being normal and correct and reasonable. I will add some caveats now. The degree to which things are problematic varies wildly. There are things that are extremely problematic to the point where I don't think it's appropriate to ever praise, celebrate, or enjoy them. And then there are things where I think the impact is so minimal that it is nitpicky and excessive to have any major conversations about them, and I think that they'll eventually rectify themselves over time as we improve as a society. But most of it is just middle ground, where everything is varying degrees of harmful and problematic, and I think it is generally totally appropriate to still enjoy something even if it is problematic or harmful to some degree or to some people. I don't think I think there's a line, I think there is a point where we have to say this is not okay, and I think there is a point where society is getting much more vocal now about saying what is and isn't acceptable. I think it's fine to acknowledge that something that you enjoy is a product of its time. For example, Blade Runner and the early Star Wars, the original Star Wars movies, and some of the really early Harrison Ford movies often have in common a very specific brand of masculinity that is, shall we say, rapey. And at the time, these scenes were played for tension. They weren't really supposed to be interpreted the way that we interpret them now, but that doesn't make the interpretation or understanding any less valid. The reason they weren't considered rapey back then is we had a different definition of what consent was. That doesn't make the current definition any less valid, and it doesn't make criticism of that media any less appropriate. But you can still enjoy old Harrison Ford movies and acknowledge that there are issues in them. I kind of feel bad for Harrison Ford. Poor dude got really typecast. There are a number of different things that I could list where this is true. It's true of pretty much every pop culture property that I myself enjoy. You are not alone in this, I promise you. All of the things I like are problematic too. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. My own videos, I'm sure, are in many ways problematic, and I will eventually hopefully be enlightened to some of them and change for the better, and others I may be ignorant of for a long time, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to like problematic things, and it's okay to acknowledge that certain things can be harmful and still enjoy them. Nuance exists. And not everything needs to be flattened to its most problematic aspect either. I definitely agree that there is a subsection of the left where nothing is ever good enough. Every single thing has to be sanitized and censored and monitored and analyzed to the point where you can't say anything without being called out. That subsection of people totally exists. I'm not going to pretend that they don't. My community has its problems. There's also a massive subsection of people on the right and among anti-feminists and anti-SJWs who don't want to engage in critical discussions about social norms, who don't want to engage in critical discussions about things that they take for granted that we see and experience every day in society, and who are not willing to listen to perspectives besides their own except for to degrade and revile them. I think that this is really harmful, and I do think it's partially our fault for being so bad at communicating what we mean. When we say things are problematic, we're acknowledging that there are issues with how they are constructed that could potentially increase some kind of societal harm. There is a huge variation of how harmful these things are. Again, a good example of the less harmful is something like manspreading, where it does perpetuate the idea that men should be allowed to and entitled to take up however much space they want, and it can be incredibly inconsiderate and kind of annoying, but my day's not ruined when it's happened, I'm not in danger when it happens, and I don't feel the need to call out every dude I see doing it. If a dude's sitting next to me and is manspreading and in my space, I'll politely ask him if he can move his leg, and usually it's no big deal. So I'm not going to write a 10-page article about the harms of mansplaining, I might write it about mansplaining, about manspreading. The harm generated is so minimal that I think that there are much simpler ways to manage it. Picking your battles is fine. I don't think you need to be demonized for liking problematic things, but I think we need to acknowledge that those things exist. And I don't think it's acceptable to like everything that's problematic. It's not acceptable to be a Hitler fanboy. There are still jokes that I personally think are kind of unacceptable, but I think we do have to allow people to grow. For example, Jason Momoa, I guess 6 years ago, made a rape joke that was pretty inappropriate, and he apologized for it. Very recently, I saw an article that was posted in a mass group with, 40,000 people dragging him and saying he's canceled for being a misogynist, when again, this is something he said 6 years ago that he apologized profusely for. We have to allow people the ability and opportunity to grow. We have to allow people the ability and opportunity to acknowledge the harms they've done or the mistakes they've made and do better. If you're going to demonize people for who they were in the past when they've made a concerted effort to change, you're not helpful. I made rape jokes in high school. I made dead baby jokes because I was oh so edgy. I think I actually sat around and made racist jokes with my friends at one point. It happened. It's something that I did. It's something I'm ashamed of, and it's something I haven't repeated since and would never repeat again. But, it doesn't inform who I am now. If you want to hold me accountable for who I was in high school, I guess that's your business, but I don't think it's reasonable to do that to me or to anybody else. I don't think it's reasonable to do that to Jason Momoa. I don't think it's even reasonable to do it to yourself. You have to allow yourself and other people the chance to be better, because that's what these conversations are really about. They're about how we can do things better. And if you don't want to be a part of that discussion, that's fine. No one's forcing you. No one says you have to be critical of the things you like. I just think that you should be. No one's saying that you have to be nice to people or considerate of their feelings. I just think you should be. No one is saying that you can't still make racist and misogynistic jokes. I'm just saying I don't like them and I won't be hanging out with you if you do. You have to decide how much you value being better versus how much you are okay with being called an asshole. If you want to continue to behave the same way, don't expect society to remain stagnant. If we as a society move forward and decide that certain things are no longer acceptable, you can either move with the tide or you can accept whatever societal consequences happen. Personally, I don't think law enforcement needs to get involved. I don't think there need to be laws saying that you can't say certain words except for in very specific contexts. I think that society as a whole is honestly getting better and better at regulating itself, and I think we're constantly drawing and redrawing the line in the sand of what is and isn't okay to do and say. Again, I don't agree with the most extreme people on the left. We have some major problems we have to engage with within our own community over there, And I'm not saying at all that I agree with the people who are the most extreme on the right. I don't really even agree with centrists, but I think that their perspectives are still valuable. Ultimately, the thesis of this video is please be more critical of the things that you like, be more willing to question things that you would normally take for granted, and be willing to try to be better. No one's saying you have to be perfect. I'm not going to shame you unless it looks like you have no interest in being a decent person. You know, I think that ultimately everything is problematic to different degrees, and how we handle that is entirely up to us. If you agree or liked this video, let me know in the comments down below, and like and subscribe. If you disagree and dislike this video, I am sure that you will tell me. That is everything I have for you on this. Wiedersehen.